Cree artist Kent Monkman introduces himself as a member of the Fisher River Cree Nation in Treaty 5 territory, which is Manitoba. His vast artistic talent centers around critically depicting themes like colonization, sexuality, loss, and resilience. Monkman intentionally creates controversial images which integrate political statements on colonialism's influence upon the subjugation, assimilation, oppression, and erasure of Indigenous peoples and people of color in Canada. Yellowbird describes that decolonization requires telling a truth. Truth completely calls into question the colonial structure. Monkman does this through his art by addressing the constructions of stereotypes of similar media representations of Indigenous and colonial masculinities. Within such a paradigm, Monkman's famous two-spirited character, Mischief Eagle Testicle, is used within his work to critique the patriarchal concepts of masculinity, femininity, and colonial concepts of indigeneity. In doing so, Monkman joins Chavez's conversation regarding how the decolonization of transgendered and two-spirited identities can be done through the embodiment of First Nations worldviews of gender and identity. Here in this image, Monkman demonstrates the stark contrast within Indigenous masculinity and hegemonic white masculinity. Neoliberal ideology would suggest that those who appear to be businessmen, the white settler men, would be much more advanced, cooperative, or power holders. There are papers in one of these men's hands which could be up to interpretation, yet it could also be a representation of economic, governmental, or political documents, thus incorporating the colonial need for written documentation as official creeds and agreements, suggesting that these men are the ones advancing their society. Behind them, however, is an Indigenous man standing tall and strong, in many ways demonstrating the traits of a noble savage Indian, which we have seen in the film Real Injun. He is mystic, wild, strong, stoic, with little clothing, painted face, and skeptical expressions as he looks up into the path in front of him. Similarly, there is a black man and the Indigenous man next to these pictures. It seems as if the clothed black man is holding the Indigenous man up, perhaps because he's preventing him from thrusting himself at somebody, because he's weak, or he's falling to the ground from grief. This expert of Monkman's piece has brought me to reflect upon my personal life and how I had been integrating the articles, readings, lectures, and reflections of gender studies into my decolonization of masculinity. My experiences reflect Morganson's concept of masculinity being a relational process, and the conversation of cutting to the roots of colonial masculinity. As in this image, a white settler man and a First Nations male are fighting. The First Nations man seems to be dominating and dangerous. Metaphorically, my grandfather, who would be the white settler, and my dad, the Indigenous man. According to my white settler family, my pop remains seen as a man who was noble and Christian, willing to save me from the wariness of my culture, whilst my dad was considered a native who walked away from his faith and got sidetracked into the world because he started reclaiming his indigeneity and showing this on Facebook. Therefore, hegemonic masculinity's roles in the male protector, family man, family head, etc. is being influenced by vast differences within each area of my family. Meanwhile, this picture brings various questions regarding the relationships between masculinity and women. Why are the men carrying the Indigenous woman on the blanket? Is this a hint to missing and murdered Indigenous women of Canada? Are they sophisticated, the white settler businessmen, and the Indigenous men not? Are they malintended men? Why is the woman unconscious? Is she alive, dead, or sleeping? Is there a sense of male ownership intended? What does this image speak to the power dynamics of patriarchy or colonialism? Monkman shows that these traditional comments of hegemonic masculinity continue to be challenged. He shows the image of an interracial gay marriage, which is suggested by one of the men wearing a Métis sash. The priest, however, remains white, showing the institutionalized favoritism of the white settler man. Traditionally, colonial concepts have been homophobic in nature, but this demonstration of inclusion, along with earlier references to the transness and two-spiritedness, helps the viewer continue to reform their ideas of masculinity. Challenging our perspectives of normative masculinity is vital to grow. As Bethany articulates, masculinity is not static. It is important to continue to address the multifaceted nature of critiquing masculinity. The diversity of Monkman's address in this painting ensures that multiple levels of oppression, power, colonial influence, racism, and patriarchal dynamics in defining masculinity are open to analysis and contemplation. In conclusion, I implore you to let this seldom be the beginning of your journey. Allow these concepts to be carried on into various areas of your life. Continue to decolonize your perspective and dismantle the colonial patriarchal oppression that is seen within you. Allow yourselves to understand in a deeper way what masculinity and femininity is and how racial oppression often informs such. And don't forget, let this be done in community, because community is the best way to do it.